Good evening and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third seminar in our series for this year. Today, we are very honored to invited Paul to give us a seminar about SDG. Paul is an international communication consultant at the United Nations Development Program based in Beijing. He actually grew up in US and he got all his education in US universities. He has a master's degree from University of Pennsylvania. And he has been living in China for over 6 years now, and he has been working for the UN for the past 2.5 years. I think today's topic will be very interesting, and he will also have interactive games with you to get better understanding for the topics. So I will let Paul to start his seminar.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Goy, for the introduction. I just want to say just off the bat, like if any of you guys want to turn on your cameras for the brave ones, do feel free to do so. So that way I don't feel as lonely. But also, you know, like Goy was saying, I really want this to be as kind of interactive and engaging for you guys as possible. So if you do want to turn your cameras, do feel free to do so. Otherwise, yes, so my name is Paul Young, and I work at the United Nations Development Program in China as an international communications consultant. I've worked there for the last about 2.5 years or so. As Goy was saying, I actually, I don't actually have a development background, so to speak. Before working at the UN, I actually worked in education. I worked in China for about 3 years as an educator before graduate school. And then before that, I was, as you were saying, at graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania. For me, working at the UN was really kind of an opportunity to kind of expand my horizons and to really expand what I had, kind of my passion for kind of education and for kind of raising awareness and kind of, I guess, you know, teaching people about important issues, kind of expanding that to a more global setting. Before, I kind of focused on leadership skills and helping people to think creatively and think outside the box, and helping people to kind of improve their communication skills. Going to the UN, I guess my focus in terms of education was to really kind of help people to kind of learn about the work of the UN, and then obviously the Sustainable Development Goals, which are our kind of operating mandate. So in many ways, I've been able to kind of working in communications at the UN, I've been able to kind of accomplish that goal, and you know, I've really enjoyed the last 2.5 years. And I think in this presentation, I'm just going to give you guys a brief introduction to the work of UNDP in particular, the SDGs, as I mentioned, UNDP in China, and then maybe in particular my team and what it is that we focus on. So let me just jump right into the PowerPoint here. I'll share screen. Okay, so what is the United Nations Development Program, right? So UNDP, I feel like, oh, let's see, is this working? I have to click, okay. Right, so I feel like sometimes when people who aren't familiar with the UN or have worked in the UN before previously, when they think of the United Nations, they oftentimes think of it as kind of one singular organization, right? But that's actually not the case. In reality, there's many different organizations and agencies that together make up the United Nations system, right? And UNDP is one of them, right? And each agency has its own particular focus area and particular specialty. And so here I kind of have a little kind of a map breaking down the UN system. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the structure and how the kind of organizations all kind of connect together and kind of the reporting channels. But this is just to kind of show you that the UN system is actually very extensive and very comprehensive. It's not just one organization. Here are some of the maybe potentially more well-known agencies within the United Nations system, and some of them I'm sure you guys have heard of. And like I was saying, each of these agencies has their own particular focus, right? So, for example, WHO here, I'm sure you guys have heard of, especially recently with them being in the news a lot because of the global pandemic over the last year. They focus on health. UN Women, they focus on gender equality. WFP focuses on food. UNESCO, education and kind of cultural heritage. UNICEF, focusing on children. And then over here is UNDP. And what we focus on is development, or more specifically, sustainable development, right? So what does that mean? Essentially, when it comes to sustainable development, we're actually really talking about a lot of interconnected issues and a lot of interconnected challenges that we at UNDP try to address. I would say that because our operating mandate is so broad, because we do everything from focusing on helping to alleviate poverty, to combating climate change, to reducing inequalities. So because our mandate is very broad in comparison to some of the more specialized agencies, we actually have a lot of overlap with some of them, right? So, when it comes to, for example, an agency like UN Women that focuses on gender equality, that's something that we also look at because we're looking at reducing inequalities as well, right? So oftentimes on a lot of different projects and initiatives, we'll actually partner with more specialized agencies to kind of get their expertise and work together. So the UN system, is in no way kind of a kind of collected group of isolated, siloed agencies, right? We are trying to work together as much as possible. And in fact, if we can have more than one agency working on a particular initiative, it's actually a good thing. So speaking of being very broad, the UNDP is also not just broad in terms of its mandate, but also broad in terms of its actual scale. So we have over 7,000 staff members all around the world, over around 6,000 volunteers, and we operate in over 170 countries and territories. So we're a very, very large organization. And the country office in China, right, where I work, is one of many, many country offices where UNDP is operating. Just really quickly before I go to the next slide, over here in like the right-hand corner, this is Achim Steiner. So he is the UNDP administrator. And he is kind of, so what that essentially means is that he's essentially the head of UNDP, and he's based out of New York in headquarters. And to kind of contextualize this within the UN system, whoever holds the position of UNDP administrator is actually I believe the third highest ranking official in the UN system behind the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General. So I've always felt that's kind of an indication of the importance of UNDP within the UN system. And okay, so here is our segue. So since 2015, UNDP's mandate has been to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, right? So what do I mean by the Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, so what are the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, right? Some of you may be familiar with them. If not, that's okay. Basically, I feel like if you go online and you kind of search for the SDGs, I'm sure you'll find a lot of very detailed information that kind of goes into more kind of official explanations. And I definitely do encourage you guys, if you're interested in learning more about the SDGs, do look it up and look into it, because obviously they're a very important global kind of mission right now. But I'm going to give you a kind of a very basic kind of description of my understanding of the SDGs in a kind of simple to understand way. Essentially, what happened is that in 2015, representatives from different UNDP member states got together, and they were trying to come up with a way, they were trying to create a way, a blueprint, if you will, for the world to develop sustainably, right? And so what they did was they came up with 17 separate but very interlinked goals that countries, cities, communities, really all of humanity in general, can strive towards in order to be sustainable, right? And they call these goals the Sustainable Development Goals. And what I should mention is that the SDGs are actually a follow-up or successor, if you will, to the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, which were for the period from 2000 to 2015. And the MDGs were very similar to the SDGs in the sense that they're kind of a blueprint for global sustainable development, except that they were more narrow in scope and a bit less comprehensive. So there was only 8 of them, while there's 17 SDGs, right? So the idea with the SDGs was to really kind of build on the MDGs and to really expand upon them and include more goals and more targets for the world that kind of takes into account all the different components of what it takes to be sustainable, to develop sustainably, right? What they didn't change, however, was the timeline, right? So the same way that the MDGs was a 15-year timeline from 2000 to 2015, the SDGs also had a 15-year timeline when they were launched in 2015. So the idea was that by 2030, 15 years later, these goals, these 17 goals, the goal was, the target was to achieve them by 2030. So now that it's 2021, we actually only have 9 years left to achieve the SDGs. And I'm not going to go into each and every one of them, but maybe I'll just highlight a few. I mean, as you can tell, I mean, these are actually very lofty goals, right? They're very, very ambitious, right? We're talking about things like, for example, SDG 1, no poverty. The goal with SDG 1 is to eliminate poverty completely from the world, right? So no one, ideally by 2030, will be living in poverty, right? It's almost crazy to imagine. Maybe, so for example, another one, SDG 3. I think that it's actually a very relevant goal nowadays, given everything that's been, oh, hold on. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, given everything that's been going on with the pandemic and COVID and everything, so good health is something that obviously everyone is, I think, it's a bit more on everyone's radar. But it's important to remember that even before the pandemic happened, health was an issue in a lot of developing countries, where we can't necessarily take for granted the same things that we can take for granted in developed countries, right? So COVID or no COVID, health is a really important issue and something that it requires a lot of work in order to get to a point where we can actually develop sustainably. And health, in fact, issues of health are a big impediment to that. And then maybe one other SDG to highlight is climate action, SDG 13. So I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with the idea of climate change and global warming. And when it comes to climate action, the goal by 2030 actually is to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, right? Because there's consensus among scientists that if we go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, that we may actually be going on a direction that is irreversible in terms of temperatures rising in our planet and kind of the damage that we are doing. So the goal is to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius. But as far as how we're actually doing on that, in reality, we're not actually doing very well as a world, as a humanity as a whole, because we're actually well on track to exceed that target. And a lot of, and as I was saying, scientists agree that if we do exceed that target, that kind of many of the consequences will will be irreversible. So a lot of urgent action is necessary in order to put us back on track to achieve the target of staying within 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. So like I was saying, a lot of these goals are very, very ambitious, very difficult, and very, very kind of broad, right? So, maybe it's not necessarily such maybe an official UN stance to be able to say this, but I'm talking to you kind of, more personally from my perspective. If we get to 2030 and we haven't achieved the SDGs, the world is not going to end. The globe will continue spinning, right? But that's not an excuse to take the attitude that, well, if we can't achieve these goals anyway, they're too difficult, why bother, right? Because at the end of the day, whatever progress that we can make towards achieving these goals before 2030, that can have a huge impact, a really important impact on what happens after 2030, regardless of whether or not we actually get to that point with a lot of these goals, right? And I'm not sure what's going to happen after 2030, right? We had the MDGs, we had the SDGs. Potentially, we'll have some other goals going forward. But I guess what I'm saying is that even if the goal seems very far-fetched, working towards it is still meaningful, right? And any progress that we can make is better than no progress. So yeah, that's kind of my personal take on kind of the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. One last thing I will say, and this was kind of a nice little analogy that a colleague of mine shared with me a little while ago. And I always liked it because I always felt like it was a really great way of representing not just kind of people that the work that people are doing in the development field, but also kind of the interconnectedness of the SDGs. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the analogy of the fisherman, right? It's better to teach a person how to fish rather than give him a fishing rod, right? Because if he can learn how to fish, then he can continue to fish even after you're gone, right? Like if you give him a fishing rod, he doesn't know how to fish, there's no use, right? Well, at UNDP and development practitioners, they like to kind of take this analogy and expand it even further, right? So yes, okay, it's great to teach a person how to fish, right? But what if there are no fish in the river that he's fishing because biodiversity degradation has killed off all the fish, right? Or they've gone extinct, right? Or what if there's no water in the river? The river is all dried up because of climate change, right? Because of rising temperatures. Or maybe he's able to get the fish, but he doesn't necessarily know how to sell them to make a living, so he can't earn income. And if he can't earn income, then if he's in poverty, then he'll be stuck in poverty and won't be able to lift himself out because there's no social mobility, there's no income stream, right? So this is just kind of I always felt it was a really nice way of thinking about it because it shows how interconnected these SDGs are. The SDGs are not, they are individual goals, but you have to think of them as a collective unit, right? Because in many ways, they don't exist in silos, and our goal is to achieve all of them. And the reason why there's a set of 17 is because they are all kind of connected together. So let's move on. If there are any questions, please do put it into the chat, and then I guess I'll try to answer them later when we get to the Q&A session. Okay, there we go. So UNDP in China. So like I was saying, I was kind of describing a little bit before about UNDP generally. And kind of the operating mandate that, and the focus of our work. But like I said, we operate in over 170 countries and territories around the world. So there's many, many different country offices. And each country office will have its own little kind of take on the work and the mandate of UNDP based on the national context and the local context of their particular country, right? So the work of, for example, UNDP Indonesia will be a little bit different than the work of UNDP Pakistan, and that'll be a little different than the work of UNDP in India, and obviously different than UNDP in China as well, right? It's all kind of based on the issues in their particular national context. even though everything is obviously geared towards, aiming towards sustainable development, right? So in UNDP China, why does this not work? I have to click it so many times. In UNDP China, there's 3 main pillars of our work, right? And we usually call it like the 3 Ps. So it's people, planet, and partnerships, right? So it's kind of easy to remember. So when we're talking about people, what we're talking about is helping to alleviate poverty, right? Helping to do things like close divides, focusing on, like I was mentioning before, gender equality, helping people to raise their capacity so they're better able to support themselves and their livelihoods, right? These are all kind of people, human-based projects that we're working on at UNDP China, right? And with the planet pillar, we're looking at kind of how to basically protect the planet for future generations against things like climate change, right? Or how to preserve the environment, how to protect biodiversity. These are all things that kind of fall under the planet pillar. And actually, one thing that's interesting to point out with planet pillar, I was talking before about how all the work of a country office is really aligned with the national priorities of their local country. With planet, like I was saying, a big part of the portfolio is working on climate change. And just last year, I believe, China made this big, really, really important climate pledge, carbon pledge, to basically peak carbon emissions by 2030, and then reach carbon neutrality by 2060, right? So this is a really, really important pledge. And so what it means is that, China, right, the idea of kind of working towards low carbon, working towards green pathways, this isn't just the UNDP thing. China is really focusing on this as well. And that just makes our job easier at UNDP because the government is aligned with, our objectives, right? Or rather, we're aligned with the government's objectives, right? So going forward, in terms of the planet portfolio, our work will essentially be mainly focused on helping China to achieve this pledge, right, of the 2030 peaking and the 2060 neutrality. So that's a really important development, right? And then with partnerships, I think this pillar, it's really kind of a reflection of China's development stage, right? In many ways, China is a little bit of a different kind of developing country than some other countries that UNDP works, because it has developed so far, and I live in Beijing, right, and we have a country office here, but I have access to so many of the things that are oftentimes more associated with a developed country, right, or potentially even more than a developed country, right? I can get takeout whenever I want. I can go out to restaurants, and well, maybe not so much in COVID times, but you have these luxuries that you wouldn't necessarily have in other country offices. So it's oftentimes I view it as kind of a reflection of China's development stage. But because it's developed so far, it's actually gotten to a point where when it comes to sustainable development, it can actually afford not to just look internally and domestically for how to support sustainable development, but then also look abroad internationally, right? China's in a position where it has the resources and the expertise and the knowledge and the experience through its own development journey to be able to actually help and advise and provide lessons learned to other countries, right? And so when we talk about partnerships, we're really talking about helping China to help other countries with sustainable development cooperation. And our role as UNDP, as kind of the international agency and the global kind of convener, so to speak, is to make sure that these engagements of China with other countries align with kind of global best practices and align with SDG principles and are kind of informed by the SDGs, right? So that's the partnerships pillar, right? So the 3 Ps: people, planet, and partnerships. Okay, next slide. So the CIP team. Okay, so now we're getting increasingly more micro, right? Start with UNDP in China, now specifically my team at UNDP China, right? So CIP stands for Communications, Innovation, and Partnerships. So the team I work on at UNDP China is actually a really, really interesting team because I would say that we're probably the most cross-cutting team in the office. What I mean by that is we don't just have our own projects and initiatives that we do. We also, our job is to really support other teams in the office with their work, right? So for example, with communications, for example, we'll launch advocacy campaigns, raising awareness about the issues related to the portfolio and the work of our office, and kind of let people know about the great work that we're doing and the achievements that we've been able to attain through our projects. But we will also do a lot of work in terms of just, I guess, more traditional communications work in terms of helping other teams, for example, with if they have a launch ceremony for one of their projects, we'll maybe help with drafting press releases, or we might be involved in helping senior management to come up with a speech that they'd be giving for an important meeting with the government to kind of get government support for a project. So our I guess the work that we do is very, I guess what I mean by cross-cutting is that it really is very broad, and it's not just things that we do internally with our team, but also helping other teams in the office as a whole. Well, actually, before I go on to innovation, actually, just kind of drawing your attention here to the picture over here. This is actually just an example of a campaign that the CIP team did during the height of COVID-19 in China, right? And it was actually a really, really successful campaign and got a lot of really great support and I guess attention globally from UNDP headquarters, because in many ways, China, not in many ways, it really was the first place to get hit by COVID. And so we were kind of on the front line trying to figure out the best ways and to kind of handle the situation and how to kind of support. And on the CIP team, we were trying to figure out, okay, when it comes to advocacy and awareness raising in terms of our communications function, what can we actually do besides the kind of basic traditional things, right? So we launched this campaign called the Spread the Word, Not the Virus campaign. And the goal of this campaign was to essentially encourage or mobilize netizens, right, the online global community, to share videos, basically sharing information or best practices when it comes to how to prevent infection, right? And a lot of these best practices we got partnering with WHO. So they shared these kind of tips for how to stay safe and prevent infection. And then these were then carried on by our global community. And what they did, and the interesting little touch on this is that what we were trying to encourage is people to share in different languages, right? So the idea is that a lot of people oftentimes don't have access to the information, the really important information to stay safe, because they might not understand the information because it's not being given in the language that they're familiar with. So we basically mobilized our very large international community to share information in their own respective local languages. And I think at the end, we had about 50 different languages shared through this social media campaign of videos, individuals just kind of sharing information about how to stay safe. So it was really, really great. And I think online on Weibo, we had, I think at the end, about 36,000, no, that's not right, 36 million views. And at this point, it's probably even more because it's obviously, the page continued on after that. But that's, I think, a really, really nice example of kind of the impact that our campaigns can have in our communications work. In our innovation work, this is kind of our second pillar. I think the best way of thinking about innovation is thinking about it as kind of thinking outside the box about how internally and externally UNDP China can improve the way we work, right? So when it comes to internally, we're really looking at thinking how we can change the way we work to be more efficient, to be more to overcome potential silos that exist in the office where teams can work more closely together, how we can be more strategic with our approach, because obviously the world is changing all the time, and the idea of innovation is to kind of keep pace with the changes and to kind of constantly make sure that our office is kind of operating kind of at the maximum efficiency and kind of taking into account all the new kind of things that are happening in the world. We're incorporating that in our work and how we work at UNDP. Externally, in terms of the innovation work that we do, basically the idea is to leverage technologies and kind of emerging ideas and methodologies in helping to advance UNDP's goal of kind of the SDGs and working towards sustainable development. So, for example, one of the things that we organized, this is kind of over here, this picture, at the end of last year, was a international forum on AI cooperation and governance. We did this together with Tsinghua University. And so what we did was we gathered dozens of experts from all around the world to basically participate in this both offline and online forum where we would discuss issues related to AI and how it's impacting the world. And as part of this, we organized 2 special forums related to AI and the SDGs, right? So how AI can impact the world kind of progress in terms of achieving the SDGs. And this is a really, really interesting event because AI is obviously a really cutting edge topic now, and especially in the tech world. And having a forum where you have so many different leading individuals from academia, from government, from private sector to be able to come together and talk about this issue, and in particular how it's going to impact sustainable development, potentially the potential harm it could have, and also the potential benefits it could have. It was obviously a very important opportunity to be able to do that, and we've never really done anything like that before. So it was very, very interesting for us. So that's kind of an example of some of the innovation work that we've done recently. And then really quickly, just on partnerships, the last kind of pillar of the CIP team is working together with companies, oftentimes private sector companies, to really leverage their resources and expertise on projects and initiatives that, again, fall under the mandate of UNDP in China. And I think this is a really important pillar because when it comes to a lot of development work, you guys might actually be surprised to know, but we actually at UNDP, we're very limited in our implementation capacity, right? We have a lot of resources, we have our global network, and again, we can connect and provide expertise. But when it comes to actually the I guess the capacity and the resources necessary to make things happen, we rely very heavily on the private sector, right? Because they have all the money, right? And they also have the knowledge and the technology, especially in a lot of these bigger companies, to really be able to make an impact. So in terms of our partnerships pillar, the idea is to really kind of help connect these resources, this technology, this expertise from these companies to development kind of situations, right? And so we kind of act as the go-between to be able to, working together with these companies, make the most impact possible. And then over here, just really quickly, last thing, this is just a picture of a recent initiative that I guess falls under our partnerships pillar. This was a project that we did here in China, where we went to rural areas and we organized trainings for SME entrepreneurs and aging entrepreneurs in particular for how to use digital tools, right? So I'm sure you guys all know, like, you talk to your grandparents, even your parents, right? They have no idea how to operate technology. It's all there, and it's very simple for young people, especially all of you guys. But for older people, oftentimes these people who haven't necessarily had the same education, operating a simple app on their phone is not something that they can take for granted. And so what we did with this was to basically try to teach people the basics of how to operate these mobile platforms, in particular these entrepreneurs, so that they could use them to basically enhance their businesses, right? So I think one of the lessons of COVID is that the businesses that were able to leverage online tools and that were more digitalized, they were more able to kind of buffer against the crisis, right? And so by giving people these skills and this knowledge, the idea is that the next time a crisis comes, they'll be able to deal with it and will be less affected by it, right? Because they have these digital capacities and these digital skills, right? Okay, so that is partnerships, and that's kind of a breakdown of the CIP team that I am a member of. And this is not advancing. Okay, there we go. So finally, before we get to kind of the interactive part of this, I just want to do a really quick rundown on how you can get involved, because I know a lot of you guys have tuned in today, or this evening for you guys in the States, or this morning in China, because because you want to get involved, right? You want to know what you can do, right? So I think that when it comes to kind of getting involved, there's really two ways you can kind of take it, right? I think getting involved in terms of helping to further or aligning with the work that UNDP does and our mandate for sustainable development. In this sense, you can do this starting from tomorrow, right? So the idea is to really just walk the talk, right? We often like to say walk the talk because it's about not just talking, but actually doing, right? So in your everyday lives, right? When you're eating, when you're at home, when you're throwing out the garbage, recycle, right? Eat less meat, conserve electricity, right? These are things which everybody can do to help advance the SDGs. And oftentimes, I know this is kind of cliche and you might hear it all the time, but people think that, oh, well, they're one person's individual choices in life, won't have a big impact. But it really is true that, if everybody, one person's impact might not matter, but if everybody collectively does this, then, it will make a difference. And when it comes to walking the talk, you can really, obviously you can't necessarily control other people, but you can control what it is that you do. So the idea is to really try to kind of take the principles of the SDGs and try to incorporate them in your everyday life. And it's not easy all the time, right? But it is something to try to do. And if you can do it more and more, you get used to it. And, it's something which really can make a difference, right? So that's kind of the walk the talk aspect of getting involved. In terms of the more, I guess, career avenue of getting involved, in terms of pursuing a UN career, potentially working even at UNDP, I think there's two options, I guess, for young people, I think, where essentially the first one is pursuing an internship. And unfortunately with internships, there really is no secret sauce, right? I think that, there's really no kind of like shorthand way of kind of getting an internship, some kind of like, easy way of doing it, right? And to a certain extent, you kind of just have to see the opening when it comes up and apply for it, right? But I think something to keep in mind is that you can prepare yourself to be kind of more competitive with these kind of positions, right? I think that when people think of internships, they often think of, all right, I just want to intern for the UN, and that's it, right? My goal is to just intern for the UN as a whole. But like I was saying, the UN is comprised of many, many individual organizations and agencies, right? So if you have a particular passion that you are interested in, right? For example, if it's the environment, you want to pursue a career at UNEP, the environment program, take steps in your own lives right now, in maybe your academic life, to gain experience or some exposure to these type of things. Join an association at your university, participate in a Model UN, for example, right? These are things which, especially early on in your career, can differentiate yourself from someone who's just trying to work at the UN, right? You've actually taken steps to verse yourself and gain experience before you pursue these internships, right? And then the other thing I'd say is monitor social media, the social media accounts of these agencies, so that you can be up to date on when these postings get listed, so you don't miss anything, and you can kind of see what it is that these agencies, and particularly the office you might be applying to, what it is that they're focusing on. And then the other avenue, I guess, is UN volunteers, right? And this is a little different than internships in the sense that it's really a full-time job. It's kind of like a full-time staff member, right? If you're a UNV, and typically UNVs are maybe a little bit older than the age range I think maybe many of you guys are at. But one possibility, and I do encourage you guys to go to this UNV website if you're interested in potentially exploring how to become a UNV. But one possibility is becoming a UN youth volunteer, right? Because the minimum age range or the minimum age is 18. So actually many of you, if you guys are in college, could potentially pursue this avenue as well, in addition to looking at internships. So if you are interested, I'm not an HR expert, and I don't necessarily know all the specific details, but if you are interested, I encourage you guys to go online, go to the UNV website, explore our website at UNDP China. We post job listings there all the time. Check out our WeChat page if we're looking for interns. We'll post these kind of listings, and so you'll know what it is that we're looking for, and potentially if you're a good fit, right? So now, I'm conscious of time, but what I'd love to do right now is a little interactive activity with you guys. Like what I was saying, I really feel like when it comes to these type of kind of lectures or online talks, it's never as interesting when it's just a one-way conversation and I'm just kind of talking, right? And especially on Zoom, I really do feel like I'm just talking to myself, except for the fact that there's a little green light right on this computer here telling me that people are listening. But the more interactive it is, the better. And so what I want to do is do this little kind of game. I guess could describe it as development trivia together with you all over Zoom. And I want to see if this works. And basically the idea is to see where your knowledge of sustainable development is. And maybe, I don't know, you can use this as a barometer for how prepared you are for a potential internship at UNDP or some other UN agency, right? So what I'm going to do now is ask all of you guys, if you're looking on your computer, to pull out your phones. And I'm going to switch my page here to, let's see how I do this. Stop the share. Okay. Okay. So there's this really great platform called Kahoot. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this. If any of you guys worked in education before, you probably are. But this is what we're going to use, and this is going to allow us to kind of collectively do this trivia game together, right? So what I want you guys to do is, like I was saying, pull out your phones, and I'm going to start this. And yep, when this game pin comes out, I want you guys to all go to kahoot.it and put in the game pin, and then you're gonna all join this game together, and then we'll take it from there. All right, first in, James. Michaela, yes. All right, this is actually working. Great. So someone joined with the name, one letter, N. Nice, 2 Catherines, one with a K, one with a C. All right, so I'm gonna maybe give it another maybe 30 seconds, and then if you guys are joining late, I think you can still join if you put in the game pin. So basically what's gonna happen is we're gonna see a series of questions on the screen, and you guys are gonna answer those questions using your phone, right? And again, all of these questions are related to development topics, and they're issues that real development practitioners kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. So it's kind of a nice way of kind of seeing some of the things that if you were to work in development, you might be dealing with through a project or an initiative or anything. So, all right, let's do this. We have 21 people. And just one quick thing before we start, how quickly you answer also, you get points for each of the questions that you answer, and how quickly you answer potentially, with a quicker answer, you can get more points. So after each question, we'll see kind of a leaderboard of where everyone is standing. And the idea is to get within the top 3, because then you can place on the podium. Okay. So let's start. Sustainable Development Geek. Okay, so first question, true or false? 75% of the world's food is generated from only 12 plant and 5 animal species. True or false? Wow, okay, that's really, really fast. Nice. Okay, so 18 of you guys got it right. Well done. Amber is our current leader. Good job, Amber. And this is just kind of a brief little explanation. I won't necessarily go into all the details here, but suffice it to say that, you know, basically genetic diversity in terms of crops is actually really important because it helps to improve crops' resistance to pests and diseases and kind of the effects of climate change. But a lot of farmers over the years have changed their crops from local varieties to kind of more genetically uniform, high-yielding varieties because, you know, they're looking for more income. So, but there's a consequence to that. So, genetic diversity is actually very important when it comes to farming. Okay, next question. How many people still lack access to electricity in the world? One out of 8 or 1 out of 4? Okay, so the majority of people got this wrong, actually. That's good, that's okay. That was a difficult question. But really quick, yeah, Amber's still in the lead. The answer is 1 out of 8. So a little under 1 billion people still lack access to electricity around the world. Most of these people are in Africa and Asia. And obviously electricity is a huge part of being able to live sustainably. So when I was saying before about kind of conserving electricity in your own lives, it really is about walking the talk because a lot of people out there don't have any electricity at all, right? So keep that in mind when you keep a light on or you keep an AC on when you don't really need it. Okay, next question. Today, worldwide, more people live in cities or rural areas. Nice. Okay, 12 people got it right. The answer is cities, right? The world is definitely increasingly urbanizing. Okay, we have a new leader. Hello is the leader. Good name, Hello. Followed by Arden and Catherine with a K. So those are our top 3 right now. And yes, the world is definitely urbanizing. I read somewhere, I think before, that actually in the next 50 years, of the top 10 biggest cities in the world, the majority of them are going to actually be in Africa, right? So that's actually a really interesting fact to think of because right now, obviously everyone thinks of big cities, they think of China. But China as well, in and of itself, is also urbanizing. There's more than, I think it's 60% urbanization in China right now. So there's a lot of consequences that come of this because of this rapid urbanization. And people can, I think sometimes also they think of cities as kind of a better lifestyle, but people can live in poverty in cities as well. There's such a thing as urban poverty, right? So this is something also to keep in mind. when thinking about rural-urban kind of divides. Okay. Next question, which is bigger? Number of Chinese citizens living abroad or the number of rural migrant workers in China? This is kind of a tough one. Who keeps drawing on the screen? Nice. Okay. 10 of you guys got it right. Good job. And hello, still in the lead. Yeah, so the answer is that there are lots and lots of rural migrant workers in China. So even though there's 40 million people living, Chinese people living abroad, there's 287 million people considered rural migrant workers in China right now. So that's a huge number. And again, that's also a development issue, right? Because how do we make sure that these people have the kind of same services and kind of considerations that if they're working in a city, do they have the same kind of access to services that people with city household registrations have, right? What do we do about these people in terms of their livelihoods, right? So again, this is a big development issue that we actually at UNDP deal with a lot. Okay, next question. Worldwide, there are more what enrolled in higher education, women or men? Huh, okay, so I thought this one might trick you guys up a bit. So actually, when it comes to education, hello, still in the lead, good job. If we're looking worldwide at averages, it's true that women actually, there's more women than men, right? 2/3 of the world's countries now count fewer than 90 men per 100 women in higher education, right? But when you look at developing countries, in this case, Sub-Saharan Africa or South and West Asia, it's still men that are being more educated than women, right? So essentially what this means is that these other countries have kind of skewed the average of men and women in education, right? But when you're looking at developing countries, there is still a kind of, I guess, a discrimination against women when it comes to particularly tertiary education, because I think a lot of times there's kind of this notion that women, the education should be reserved for the men, the women should be working in the household. So while the average globally, I guess it's good that more women are now in education, there's still more work to be done in developing countries. Okay. Next question. Worldwide, there are more people who are. This is an interesting question. Undernourished. Okay, so this is a sad question, unfortunately, and I, as an American, am well, I'm not ashamed to admit, but I'll admit that probably a lot of these overweight people, big portion of them actually from my country. But yes, there are more overweight people in the world than undernourished, and it's not something you would actually think, right? Because I think oftentimes when you think of development, you're always thinking of people who don't have enough food to eat, right? But I think what this means is essentially that there's this huge disparity between kind of people living in developed countries where they're eating way more than they need, like what their share is, and then people in developing countries where they're eating way below what their share is, right? So it's important to keep in mind, again, when it comes to your everyday lives, maybe save that food instead of wasting it, right? Maybe share it with someone else instead of throwing it out, right? These are all little kind of things. When you actually look at the numbers and they're so stark like this, they kind of remind you to kind of maybe keep them in mind, when you're going about your everyday lives. Okay, let's move on. Next question. Which type of energy receives the greatest amount of subsidies worldwide? Fossil fuels or renewable energy? Nice. All right. Good job, guys. Fossil fuels is the correct answer, which is unfortunate because hello is killing it right now. Good job. Hello. Why do people keep drawing on the screen? Stop drawing on the screen. So fossils, yeah, it's obviously as fossil fuels are currently, a lot of companies, right, are kind of, their interests are embedded in continuing fossil fuels, you know, instead of transitioning to renewable energy, right? And so these companies and then fossil fuels as a whole will continue to receive more subsidies, right? So if we're to really kind of combat climate change and get to a point where we can really transition to carbon neutrality, we have to direct and change these subsidies to go to renewable energy and companies that are working on renewable energy sources or renewables. And China is actually a world leader in this. So China is providing a really good example for other countries to look at when it comes to renewable energy. Okay, last question. Who is responsible for achieving the SDGs? This question I expect everyone to get. I think I've made the point very clear. Yes, okay, thank God. If anyone said the UN, then I would have failed as a lecturer. So that's good, yes. It is everyone's responsibility to achieve the SDGs. We all have to do this together. While the UN is you know, responsible in terms of administrative capacity and kind of advocacy and awareness raising as an intergovernmental organization, we can't do any of this without all of you guys and everyone in the world, right? So everyone has to buy into this mission and this goal of achieving the SDGs by 2030 if we're to get there. Okay, so that was the last question. Let's see if Hello has managed to keep her lead. All right, someone is just not happy with the results. That's why they're drawing on the screen. All right, yes. So our three leaders are Hello in number 1, Edward in 2nd place, and Arden 3rd place. Well done to each of you guys. You guys are truly sustainable development geeks, and definitely keep up the good work. And you know, if you guys are interested in learning more about these kind of topics, one thing I can recommend, let me just quickly transition out of this screen to go back to the presentation. Right, so what I would recommend is so these questions actually came from a game that we've developed at UNDP China, and specifically the CIP team, called Sustainable Development Geek. And the idea is to really kind of, like I was saying, encourage people to discuss these issues more, to raise awareness about them, and kind of have people debate about these topics. Because a lot of these questions are not obvious, right? They have different perspectives, and they challenge a lot of our potential misconceptions, right? So if you guys are interested in seeing more of these questions and playing a game and kind of learning more about sustainable development topics in general, scan this QR code or go to cn.undp.org/SDGeek. And you can download or play our little mini game on WeChat, if you have WeChat. I'm sure all of you do, and see how high you can score on the global leaderboard that we have there. So I expect Hello to do just as well in the mini game as she did with the Kahoot here. So good job to you guys. And at this point, I will transition to the Q&A. So I know we're a little over time here, that we started a bit late. So if you guys have any questions, do feel free to ask them now. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can see the chat.
Yeah, so you can either put it in the chat or you can just open your mic and ask about the question. Seems like you give a very clear seminar. No one has a question.
Or it was just so boring that everyone is tuned out. So a question from Amber. As a student in the United States, how can I start a project to achieve any of the SDGs? Well, I think that it really depends on your context, right? I mean, it's a very general question, but I think that, if you want to do something to help achieve the SDGs, I would say just do it. I don't think that there's necessarily a how. I think that, for example, if you're in college, talk to other people that potentially are interested in the work of the United Nations, right? If there's a club or associations which are dealing with this kind of topic, join them, right? I think that, as I was saying, the work of the SDGs is the work for all of us, right? And so if you want to do something that, if you're specifically passionate about a specific issue or one of the particular SDGs, then start talking to people, get other people to be passionate with you, and really pursue it, right? For example, if you are at a university, what you could do is, talk to a professor, see what, if their specific focus is in this particular SDG or this area, talk to them, see what ideas that they have. And I think that the more you learn about the topic, the more you'll be able to be informed about what you can do to potentially help to achieve them. Right? Question from RMC. Okay. When did you join the UN? I said this in the very beginning, but I joined about 2.5 years ago. And before working at the UN, I working at UNDP here in China, I didn't really have any other UN experience. I was always familiar and kind of interested in the UN because I've always been a very global international person. I studied abroad and I've lived abroad for a long period. But I didn't have any formal kind of background in working in the UN. So for me, it was really an opportunity to kind of expand my horizons a bit and kind of work to kind of take my platform and take advantage of the UN platform to reach a larger audience and have a potentially wider impact. Let's see. Hello. Oh, is this Hello who won SD Geek just now? Okay. Are there any UN workshops for high schoolers? Are we talking about UNDP organized workshops? If we're talking about UNDP organized workshops, then yes, I would say that there are. It really kind of depends on where it is that you're based. If you're in China, so for example, some of the things that we've done in the past as part of the CIP team is a lot of these kind of little boot camps or initiatives or little events where we invite people, I think as young as high school and definitely in college, to learn about the SDGs, to be involved in kind of the event itself, to kind of share their opinions and kind of the idea is to kind of really raise awareness among youth, right? So we actually have a lot of youth events here. We actually have a whole youth portfolio in the UNDP China office. And then we also do a lot of advocacy work among youth in China here. So actually really quickly, I can mention one of the things that we're planning on doing hopefully this year is a youth AI for SDGs event. So again, we're going to be potentially working with Tsinghua to encourage kind of youth teams from around the world to come up with ideas for how AI can help advance and support the SDGs. And again, we're looking for international global teams. So if you're in the States, that's actually okay. You can potentially participate, and we're going to get more information out on this in kind of the near future. So definitely stay tuned to our social media channels to learn more. Okay, so there are no other questions right now here. I know that there were a few questions in the Google Forms that I haven't addressed yet. So maybe I'll just look at these 3 questions. So there's a question from Colin who asked, what goals are the hardest and why? Again, it really depends. I don't think any goal is particularly easy. And when it comes to achieving the SDGs, you're really looking at kind of collectively achieving them, right? But if I was just to kind of speak off the cuff, I'd say, climate action, it may not be, objectively the hardest SDG, but it really is an SDG that everyone, it really is going to be affecting the entire world, and everyone, whether you're rich or you're poor, the effects of climate change aren't going to, they don't care how much money is in your bank account, right? So I would say that climate change we often refer to as the existential threat, the greatest existential threat of our time. We often say that a lot in a lot of the UN communications that we do. So it may not be the hardest, but it's one of the most important, and especially one that we're focusing on at UNDP China, SDG 13. Another question I have is how to be involved in the UNDP program to help more children outside of the US. Okay, well, helping children outside of the US, I would say, so I guess we're talking about UNDP, I guess globally. I would say that helping children is part of UNDP's mandate, like I said, but potentially more aligned with UNICEF's mandate, right? So again, each agency has their own specialty and area of expertise. If you're looking specifically at trying to help children, UNICEF does initiatives all around the world to do exactly that. And I don't know specifically in what way you're looking to help children, but if it comes to, if you're talking about education, if you're talking about health, these kind of things, UNICEF focuses specifically on these things. So I would say definitely look up UNICEF, check out their website, follow them again on social media, and see the kind of work that they're doing and the kind of programs that they're doing, and see if these are kind of things that, if you were to pursue a job in the UN, that you would like to do, because maybe UNICEF might be a more suitable organization for you to pursue those passions. Okay, another question here in the chat. Does UNICEF only help children or also adults? So I don't work at UNICEF. So I can't necessarily say that I'm fully versed on exactly every single project that they do, but I would say that in the majority of cases, because of their particular mandate, their projects are going to be, at least in some way, related to helping children. Though I'm sure there's instances where helping adults actually, by kind of connection, by association, also helps children. So I would say that yes, there are probably projects that also help adults as well, but the overall mandate is to focus on children. We have any other questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I don't know, maybe Goi, do we want to wrap it up here, or?
Yeah, I think if there's no other question, we will just call the end of the seminar. And thanks for everyone. Thanks, Paul, give the excellent seminar today. We will have a recording posted, so if your friends want to watch the recording, they can watch it.